Welcome, everyone, to Satan and Coffee. I am Adius Dade, and I am joined today by the Gentleman Occultist. You don't mind if your name is used, right? Okay. So this is Blake. He goes by Blake Green. He goes by the Gentleman Occultist on TikTok. Very quick growth on TikTok, I might add. I remember first came across him. He had maybe 2,000 something subscribers or followers on TikTok, and the last time I checked, I think he's up to like 80,000, which like people are following him in droves, which is it's a claim to fame, man. It's congratulations on the follower count and getting your stuff out there. It's absolutely amazing. So what we're going to be talking about today, guys, we're going to be talking about Blake, what he's doing, what he's building, what he's creating, which is all very interesting stuff. And then we're going to be kind of also talking about kind of some of the stuff we've been talking, about off of camera here, regarding, kind of like the necessity to standardize the occult, which is, I know, not a very popular idea among many people. But it's nice to know that there are more people out there that kind of agree with the necessity of a standardization. But I mean, Blake, to kind of start out, like, how about you just kind of like introduce yourself? What are you about? What do you like? Like, how did the Gentleman Occultist come to be?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on today. This is actually my first podcast, and so I'm a little nervous. I'm going to try to suppress my nerves, but I really appreciate you having me on. Honestly, the Gentleman Occultist skyrocket was completely by accident. I was not necessarily prepared or thinking that it was going to take off like it did, but I grew up very religious, and from that religious upbringing, I had a very traumatic deconstruction, and it gave me this kind of quarter life crisis in my life where I was really, trying to struggle with what my beliefs were, and where I thought I was going to go when I died. And I had all these different things in my mind, and there was a lot of religious trauma that was brought up by it. And when I first started getting into other forms of spirituality and religion, it started off more in Eastern philosophy and Eastern occultism, learning about Zen, learning about Buddhism, yoga and stuff like that. It was kind of my gateway into the occult world, just by learning of other traditions and traditions that I thought would help me kind of find answers for my own suffering and trying to heal from religious trauma. And when I eventually kind of came full circle, I went into Western occultism, and I started learning about the history of Western occultism, the rise of, esoteric traditions in Europe, and how they translated into America, and started getting involved in organizations, started having a lot of friends that were involved in different esoteric traditions. And for me, I think the Gentleman Occultist idea was a way of, when I first started making videos, it was really to touch on how religious trauma causes scarring, especially in our youth, and how we as adults can kind of heal from that religious trauma. And so occultism for me was a way of healing religious trauma and being able to accept myself for having questions. It was kind of my process of shadow work. And so wanting to kind of help other people discover how religious trauma can be healed through occultism, through shadow work, was what I think resonated with so many people. And I genuinely think that's the reason why I grew such a following so quickly, is because I put my finger on the pulse of, your suffering, religious trauma hurts. These are some steps that you can take to be more comfortable with yourself. because most of the comments that I have in my videos are, this speaks exactly to my childhood. This is exactly how I feel. You're able to give language to things that I've always thought, but I couldn't put words to. And so, I think that's kind of where the Gentleman Occultist started growing. And so now it's like, I need to start focusing on, what the rest of the content is going to be aside from healing religious trauma.
Fair. Like, I do think that is definitely kind of like a point that, I mean, I've heard it. I've definitely heard it kind of spoken about, the religious trauma aspect of it, and I guess people brush across it. They don't really dig into like how to integrate, right? How to do the shadow work, so to speak. Regarding that, we actually had last night we did Apocrypha, and we talked about kind of like the misuse of shadow work. And how kind of like it's turned into kind of like an excuse for people to be horrible people to other people because they say that they're dealing with their stuff, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I definitely feel that. I mean, like, I don't know if I would definitely inherently say that I suffered religious trauma. I know that like I definitely had monotheism, Catholicism specifically kind of shoved down my throat when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I remember the wooden spoon coming out the first time I drew a pentagram. We talked about that before, getting my grandmother coming at me with the wooden spoon.
Yep.
She was Italian. So, the wooden spoon was, a discipline tool.
Absolutely.
Just like with
it
the
can
Mexicans.
Make pasta, it can give you a
right,
welt.
Exactly, right? Just like the Mexicans, it's la chancla, right? The sandal. I can say that, guys. I live in Mexico. All right, so, but it's I don't know if it was like a very consistent thing though. Like it's like my stepdad and my step grandparents and stuff like that. I mean, they were religious in the sense of like, yeah, they believed in God. They had to, the candles all over the place and stuff like that. And I think with my mom being a witch and seeing like what she considered ritual, and then seeing what my grandmother would do. Like I remember my grandmother would do this thing that anytime like a family member was flying, she would get a candle of like a particular saint or something like that. And she would light that candle on her, like she had this hutch thing in the dining room, and she would set the candle up there like with her, Virgin Mary statue and Jesus statue and stuff like that, and light the candle. And I remember sitting there and I'm looking at it and thinking about like what my mother would do and thinking about what my grandmother was asking, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Like, I don't see a difference.
It's all ritual.
like, like the only difference is like what God you're talking to here,
Exactly.
But then like how much my grandmother hated, occultism, like, or like, paganism, like looking at pentacles and stuff like that, like how evil she thought it was. And I was just like, but you're doing the same thing. Like, I mean, you wear a dead guy around your neck.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that you can't get much closer to Santa Muerte without actually going into Santa Muerte, like by wearing a dead guy around your neck,
Yeah, that's human. You're wearing human sacrifice on your neck.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just like, I'm thankful that like I was able to kind of like as a kid kind of sit there and balance these things out, right? And I'm thankful for having, my mother that was, into, that she's a witch. And so seeing what she would do, that was few and far between because everyone in the house was Catholic, except for her. And the conversations that we would have about things, my mother's one of those, like, she's a fey witch.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So like we would have conversations about like how she fully believes 100% that like, dragons, gnomes, fairies, all those things are real. And they were the gatekeepers of magic. And the reason why most people don't see them is because we lost the privilege of having access or free access to that ability, and you have to earn it.
Interesting.
like, I mean, I don't know how much of that I actually believe, but that's what she believes. You
Sure.
know, it's, you
That's
know, because
great.
she believes that each one of those things exists to help balance the earth, right?
Yeah.
And that, you know, all of those things are directly connected to the earth, that the earth is a living organism. Like, she was the one that kind of described to me, like, you know, trees are like hair,
Mm,
water, like the magma and the lava is like blood, you know, like all of
yeah.
these things, the water are tears, you know, like all of these like different kind of concepts and how everything kind of molds in. And like, so that's where that kind of concept came from. And then it made a lot more sense because
Yeah. That's beautiful.
my grandmother on my mom's side, she's Native American. So
There you go.
there was a lot of crossover. Like when you listen to my grandmother talk and you listen to my mom talk, there's a lot of crossover, you
Yeah.
know, and parallel between the ideas. So I'm just thankful that I had access to that because it allowed me to kind of keep an open mind and kind of look at the full spectrum of everything and be like, aren't we all doing essentially the same thing here? You know?
Yep.
So what do you think is the most common form of religious trauma people suffer?
Oh goodness. Well, one of the things that I've seen, not only from a personal standpoint, but from what a lot of the comments I get are, is trauma related to fear-based belief or punishment. A lot of religious upbringing is about fire and brimstone, and I remember going to not only Sunday schools but also summer retreats, like Christian summer camps. And the first thing you're taught is about, like, you need to turn your life over. You're going to go to hell. This is what, eternity looks like. You're going to be burned forever in a lake of fire. And so that alone has so much religious trauma associated with it. And people are literally terrified, because if that's genuinely what you believe, every waking moment of your life is a question mark of, am I living up to the standard that is being placed on me? Or if I accidentally get into a car crash and die in the next 5 minutes, am I going to be burning forever in hell? And that is why, like, praying every single night and hoping that your sins are forgiven, or hoping you didn't do anything bad enough that day in order to merit getting into heaven and not burning forever in hell, is so ingrained in you, and every single day you think about it. And so for a lot of people that are going through religious traumatic healing, it's this, fear-based response of, okay, I feel like I'm no longer going to go to hell, but then what else is there? You know what I mean? Like, how do I heal from indoctrination? And it kind of whiplashes people, almost a trauma response of, well, I used to believe this, but now what do I need to believe next to make sure that I'm safe? And so that is kind of what I did at first too. You go from one dogma to another because you're not sure what dogma is the right dogma until you finally start to heal and realize there is no dogma. You know what I mean? And that takes a long time. And some people who are, 10 years or more out of their religion are still dealing with religious trauma.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, yeah, I don't think that, like, I mean, I've always been like, even when I was a kid, I was always inquisitive, right? I was like, all right, like, I need to understand this a little bit more. And, the whole hell concept and stuff like that. I think this is why, like, churches didn't really like me, because, like, like, I would ask the tough questions and then inevitably you get, well, that's a mystery of the Bible, we don't question it,
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing was, it's like, Christians and Catholics themselves get their own scripture wrong, because if you read the Bible, so as a kid between the ages of 14, 15, and 16, I've read the Old Testament and the New Testament twice. And then I read it again as an adult. So 3 times I've read the Bible.
Yeah.
Then I've read the Torah. I've read the Quran, and I guess there's other books within the Kabbalah that I've missed. Torah is part of the Kabbalah, and I missed those other books, but the Torah I read, and they got it wrong, because the thing is the whole idea of heaven and hell is in the Bible itself. Heaven is described as closeness to God, and hell is described as distance from God, not an actual place. There really isn't, until you get to Revelations, there really isn't anything describing hell. But Revelations doesn't even describe hell. It does describe a gnashing of teeth and fire and this, that, and the next thing. But it's talking about the end of the world, not not hell. And I think people took what they got out of Revelations and then applied that to what they believed hell would be. But the Bible itself never specifies like a physical place of fire and brimstone and eternal suffering and stuff like that. And then, it always, another thing I always thought was interesting was the fact that, like, if you read the Old Testament, if you read the New Testament, we're not talking about the same God. It's not the same God.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bible borrowed a lot from Canaanite mythology. And you have the Canaanite pantheon of gods, where El is the progenitor god, and then you have a pantheon of other higher beings underneath El, and Yahweh is a storm god. He's a god of war, and that's why in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel are venerating Yahweh, and it is because Yahweh was chosen as the deity from the entire pantheon to be the God of Israel. And that's why that God had them go and kill other tribes of Israel. They killed the Midianites and stuff like that. And people associate El and Yahweh and the Elohim all as one thing, but they're all completely different. And you're right, hell isn't even a physical place. They often use Sheol as a word to describe hell, which Sheol was a physical place where they burned trash, and oftentimes like dead bodies would be sent out there to be burned. And so Sheol is described as this place of fire where bodies would be thrown, but that was a literal physical place where they took their trash. It wasn't this metaphysical realm to punish, non-believers. And so people mix up the Bible. And I think that's another reason why I kind of feel a need to address certain religious or biblical history in some of my videos too, because understanding biblical literacy from a poetic standpoint and from the perspective of people who actually lived in those times and what they were trying to say symbolically is so much more powerful of a way to live your life as a Christian. If you still want to consider yourself a Christian, you can still do that and also have biblical literacy to understand the metaphors and the symbolism behind what you're describing. And it doesn't have to be literal. It doesn't have to be this back and forth of fear and punishment and salvation for you to live a happy Christian life. But unfortunately, that's not where Christianity is right now. It's very dogmatic. It's very biblically oppressive, and it's very fear-based. And so it's one of the things that I'm trying to use my platform for, to give biblical history literacy to people who are ingrained in this dogma. And I'm not going to save everybody, but there are a lot of people who go, oh, wow, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? And as long as you can get someone to say, that's interesting, I didn't know that, you can put enough of a kernel in someone's ear to have them start their own healing. You know what I mean? All it takes is like one little crack in the foundation of dogma to eventually come out of it.
No, 100%. I mean, so for me, when I look at things, I don't have any hate towards the Christian or the Catholic or the Muslim or the Jew, but I've always been very open. I've always been very direct with the idea that I absolutely, unequivocally, and passionately abhor the monotheistic Abrahamic triptych that is Christianity, Islam, and Judaism.
Yeah.
And I know that's an extreme stance to take, but it's not the people that I have an issue with. It's the organization. Like I said, I mean, I told you when we had our conversation yesterday that, you know, there's a community member that we have that goes by the name Mark V. He's an Eastern Orthodox Christian. He used to be an occultist. Him and I have amazing conversations. I have no hate towards that man, like, you know, none whatsoever. And, you know, it's just one of those things that, unfortunately, you know, with these organizations, you know, there's too many lies, there's too many deceptions, there's too many manipulations, you know, going all the way through. And then the fact that people will use these beliefs to further destructive behavior towards people that they disagree with. We saw it with Christians with the Crusades. We are seeing it with, you know, Islam over the last, you know, 50, 60 years, you know. Judaism, I think, is the only one that, like, hasn't actually had, like, you know, a murderous rampage through history, at least I'm aware of, you know. But, you know, unfortunately, they're the ones that kind of put a cap on the knowledge that we have. You know, like, if you look at it, a lot of, like, especially like if you look through like Goetic magic or the Qliphoth, you know, there's definitely, you know, it's what they call Jewish mysticism, right? I mean, you know, at least the Qliphoth. And the problem is I have to sit there and I have to go, how much of this have you watered down? Like, it feels like throwing scraps off the table, you know. It's like, okay, we're always going to have people that want to be into this shit, so let's give them a bone so they stop digging and think that they found something miraculous. You know. So
quit digging. Just take what we give you.
Exactly. You know, and to further that, I remember maybe a year ago, I stumbled across this Catholic podcast, which is run by an actual priest, right? And, you know, I remember him in this podcast. He was talking about, you know, you need to don your spiritual armor and, you know, go to war against the denizens of hell. And unfortunately, that's us. You know, and, you know, I remember feeling compelled to leave a comment. I left a comment in the comment section. I said, look, we want to be left alone. Like, you know, as someone that, you know, is being chosen as a community leader here, we want to be left alone. We want to be able to live our life how we see fit. We don't want war. We don't want conflict, you know. But I said, but understand that if you do attack us, we will defend ourselves. You know, we're not going to roll over. And then he actually commented on, like, replied to my comment, and his comment was, bring it. That was his comment. Bring it.
Like, bro, I just said I didn't want to bring it. What are you talking about?
You know, I'm just like, it's like you just want conflict. You just want this. Like, you want the Crusades to happen again. Like, well, what is the problem here?
That's exactly what I was going to say. They want the crusade mentality so badly because the concept of washing the world of evil and sin is such a powerful militaristic cult following to get behind, right? And I remember even as a kid, you know, the concept of you have to go out and talk to people, right? Like, you can't just be like, you know, the thing I love about occultism is you could be a solitary occultist. You don't have to go out and proselytize your occult practice. And being a Christian, you don't, like, they don't teach you just how to be a solitary Christian. Even though Jesus spoke heavily about, you know, pray in a broom closet, pray in secret. You don't need to announce, you know, your faith. They go against their own teachings by saying, no, you need to proselytize. You need to be a person who goes out and actively pursues people who are non-believers to get them to convert. And I get the mentality too, because if I think that the end of the world is coming, and I know it's going to come, And I know that you are not prepared for the end of the world, and I can save you by preparing you for the end of the world. Then I have a duty to try to save you, because especially if I think you're a friend and I think you're unprepared for the end of the world, I'm going to do whatever I can to say you need to be prepared, you need to accept God, you need to accept Jesus, because I'm doing my part to make sure you're okay. And I get that mentality because I lived that mentality. And so they see it as like I'm doing a service for God, I'm doing a service for society, and they don't see it as anything other than that. And so I sympathize with that mindset because I lived that mindset as well. And it's interesting seeing both sides, because I know a lot of atheists get very angry at Christians for what they do, and I agree. But at the same time, I understand why they do it. And I think that, seeing both sides puts me in this position where I'm like, dang, you can attack certain ideas from different angles because you understand very fundamentally why those ideas even exist.
No, exactly. I think my only fear with it is when it becomes propaganda,
Oh yeah.
that they're doing God's work. Then you get kind of like, I mean, they've been isolated incidents so far, and they haven't been very rampant, and thankfully they haven't like really grabbed any traction. There isn't like a large group of people willing to do this. But I think you have these groups in I think it's North Carolina, or the Carolinas somewhere, that would join, pagan Facebook groups, figure out where physical meetings were going, and then go and harass pagans, at like coven meets and
Yeah.
stuff like that, which is disgusting. Then you
Yep.
have, the guy that tried to burn down the Satanic Temple. And don't get me wrong, I
Hmm.
am not a
Yep.
fan. Like, and I've said this a million times. Like, I am not a fan of the Satanic Temple. Like, I'm not. Like, I'm just going to put it out there. Nor myself, nor Dyra. Like, neither of us are fans of like the Satanic Temple. We don't agree with the direction that the Church of Satan has gone. By turning it into like
Interesting.
an elitist organization. That like
Yeah.
it's open to the highest fucking bidder. We don't agree with that stuff, but we do agree with like its right to exist, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And the right for people to believe in it and the right for people to follow it. Our opinion doesn't matter, nor should it influence your decision making on what you want to or don't want to be a part of. That being said, there was somebody who tried to burn it down in Salem, Massachusetts by throwing a Molotov cocktail at it, and then there was something that happened before that. There was like, I think somebody tried to break in, and, cause physical damage and harm to the people inside of it. And, then there's the guide stones that they were completely destroyed.
Yeah.
You got people in England defacing and, oh God, my brain ADHD, man. Uh, um, Stonehenge, and it's just thankfully that these are like isolated incidents.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you have politicians that are willing to take a public stance on, Christian nationalism and fundamentalist ideals, and project this hate outward and say, this is God's country. The devil has no place here. Anything that isn't Christianity is Satanism. It's the devil's faith, going all the way down to destroying, I think it was Ohio. I think they had like this state thing where different faiths could come in and do kind of like almost like their own version of like a nativity thing for Christmas. And the Satanic Temple inevitably went in and did their own thing. And then you had an actual politician go in and destroy it, and it's like,
jeez,
there are a lot of mentally and psychologically unstable people in the world. There are a lot of people that take these fundamentalist ideas and are willing to take it to an unhealthy, dangerous, and terrifying extreme. And if you get enough people that are in power that are propagating this shit, inevitably something is going to pop off.
Yep.
And people are going to get hurt.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. It's I've never seen any like occult organization or any fringe religion. I mean, Buddhist temples don't go around burning stuff down. Hindu temples don't go around burning stuff down. And Jewish mosques don't go, or Islamic mosques don't go around burning stuff down. And so it's unfortunate to feel like, to hear the politicized evangelical movement talk about persecution and talk about how all these other religions are out there to persecute, and Christianity's being attacked and stuff like that. No one's attacking Christianity. I think what you said about we just want to be left alone, that hits it right on the head. Most other religions would rather just stay in their own lane and not have to worry about if you disagree, great, leave a comment, move on. But if you go so far as to start normalizing behaviors that lead to real physical harm, not only to buildings, but like to people, then you're getting into a realm where your religion is no longer about peace and love for all. It's about, we're right, you're wrong, and how can I use religious militarism to wash away anything else that isn't us.
100%. And it's just honestly just terrifying to me, because my wife is an open online occultist. I am an open online occultist. We have 2 kids, that live, in the home. And obviously we don't project or talk about, where we live specifically or anything like that. It's, I'm very specific about what I share and don't share online for that reason, because I have a family that needs to be protected, which I will never use. I will never use my real name online. It's about protecting the home, because people get stupid. People have stupid ideas that they think they're and the problem is these aren't people that understand or know that they're doing something hateful. They believe wholeheartedly that they're doing the right thing. And that is the most dangerous type of violence, is when the person perpetuating it or committing it believes with all of their being that what they're doing is correct and right, because they're not going to think twice about killing someone, because they've already created that divide in their head that you're completely dehumanized. We are completely dehumanized. Us as occultists, we're no longer human to them, right? And this is one of the things, like, the American political spectrum right now, like, how things are politically in the United States, like socially in the United States. Everyone is dehumanizing everyone. The left dehumanizes the right because, everyone's a Nazi, and the right dehumanizes everyone on the left because everyone's far left and, they're communists,
Yep.
And it's just, you cannot function as a society if you are picking teams all the time and dehumanizing the other side. You can't. Yeah. It's just, Absolutely. It's terrifying. It's terrifying, man. Like, I'm sorry we're going down this road with this conversation, but it does legitimately does scare me.
Well, I appreciate the conversation too, because I feel like it needs to be said more. I mean, I feel like this is, right up my alley in terms of why I feel so strongly about occultism in general, is because the literacy is not there. And I've heard, debates among the atheist and Christian community where people talk about the concept of sacrificing your child, right? Like, people use, Abraham and Isaac as an example for, religious, righteous judgment, right? If you knew God told you that it was okay to kill your child as a human sacrifice, would you do it? And you knew it was God telling you to do it. Would you disobey God, or would you have to do it? And Christians bend themselves backwards to try to justify their answers for why they would have to do something if God told them to do it. Whereas any other normal person would say, absolutely not. I would go get a psychological evaluation before I ever decided that killing my child was justified. And just that alone, it speaks to where the average mindset is. And, I try not to generalize, but when you see it so prevalently, the loudest people who are the mouthpieces of a religion are going to get the most amount of exposure, and everyone's going to associate what these loud mouthpieces say with their religion. And I know that this isn't everyone. I have plenty of Christian friends who are completely against Christian nationalism and stuff like that. They're very much in the belief of, let's focus on the teachings of Jesus and stuff. And I really do appreciate that, but it does nothing to stop the swell of people who are using political and military power and influential, mega church pastors pushing agendas and stuff. None of the people who believe the teachings of Jesus are going to stop the people who are using it for agendas. And, it needs to be put out there. And I don't know what the answer is. I hope that occultism can be used in some capacity to slow or stop. If anything, just getting more information out to other people is important, because people only hear what is pushed out to them. There's so much propaganda pushed out, and there's nothing to counteract propaganda. And so having podcasts like yours and having, influencers be able to have a counterculture to religious indoctrination, or to Christian nationalism or militarism, or whatever you want to call it, having other mouthpieces to kind of make sense of why things are happening and why the youth is like falling into it as well. It's not just boomers who are perpetuating this idea. There's so many of the younger generation that are getting behind these religious, militaristic ideas of washing away America of anything that's not Christian. And so trying to be a mouthpiece for the opposite side, like, hey, there's nothing evil about this. And that's why I think, symbolic literacy is so important. I try to make videos about how occult symbols are not scary or harmful, because I have family members who have argued with me about how, the pentagram is a satanic symbol and it's evil. And there was a book on a shelf that had a pentagram, and they wanted to buy all of the books so that they could burn them. And I was like, do you hear like how you sound? You see a symbol on a book, and your instinctual thought is, I need to get all of these books off the shelf so I can burn them so that no one can have them. And it wasn't even a harmful book. It was a book about this girl who was a demon hunter. It was, some young adult novel about this girl who was a demon hunter, and they had a pentagram on the front. And it was like, okay, so it's a young adult novel about this girl who's a demon hunter, but because it has a pentagram, you're going to lose your mind. And you're going to say, well, this entire book is evil, and demons are going to start jumping out of the page. Like, it's religious psychosis. And I think that trying to be a sane, stable mouthpiece to try to course correct, I don't know what it's going to do, but I'm hoping the occult community can start to push back against the wave.
I completely agree. I mean, for the last, I think, 5 years that I've been doing these shows, one of the things that I've always been a big proponent for is what I call occult unification. And when people hear that initially, they kind of freak out, and they're like, oh, well, what do you mean everybody needs to believe the same thing? It's like, it has nothing to do with belief and everything to do with philosophy. It's one of the things that I think would be the most powerful about it, like unifying as an occult community isn't about unifying belief. It's about unifying ideals. And there's a lot of power in the idea of hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of people that believe something different or even slightly different from the other, being able to come together as a group and not giving a shit about what you actually believe or what you actually practice,
Yeah.
but wanting to be together because we want to protect each other.
Yep.
Because we want to stand together and say, this is wrong. Like my co-host on Apocrypha, Mystic, he works in the medical field, and he's not like a low level person. Like has a director level. And even he had to deal with someone taking his personal Facebook posts and then going over his head and saying, you need to fire this person because they believe in the devil, because they're doing satanic shit,
Oh my goodness.
And thankfully, because of the trust that he has, the trust and rapport that he has garnered over the years in his career, he was able to kind of go in and say, this is none of your business.
Yep.
Right. Like, and first and foremost, it isn't what you're saying it is. And even if it was, it's none of your business. And, he was able to dodge a bullet, with his position. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that ability. Right. Mm-hmm. They are just a coffee barista, or they are just, a nurse. They don't have the trust and rapport that Mystic built over years of working in his field, to lean on and say, I don't give a shit what you say. It's none of your business,
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, man, it's terrifying. And it's one of those things that, I do wish that we had something that we can lean on as occultists to be like, an organization that we could go to that has, legal representation and, stuff like that, and go and say, hey, these people are doing this to me because I believe this. Help me. Mm-hmm. And that's, for me, that's what occult unification is. That's what it means.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I started a online occult society in October, and we quickly grew to we're almost at like 700 people. And one of the things I think is so important to understand about having a eclectic occult community is everyone is coming from some background. Because most of them are people who follow me on TikTok, they come with, religious trauma and stuff like that. And so we have that as kind of a unifier, right? We come from a background where we're all dealing with some form of religious trauma. And now we're trying to understand, well, what's the next thing? And so that's kind of one of the biggest unifiers of that group right now. But it's not just those people. It's also people who have been occultists their whole life. And it's people from every part of the world. I mean, there's maps on the program where you can kind of see where everyone is located. And literally, we have people from Africa and Russia and parts of Europe and Australia and all across America and Canada and South America. People are from all over the world because occultism speaks to a general reverence for the mystery of the universe. We have a draw to the mystery of the universe, and we want to try to come together to find answers. And there are people who are shamans, there are people who are heathens, there's people who are witches and Satanists, and there's people who are Kabbalists and mystic Jews and mystic Christians. And what's so great is everyone gets along so well. I have yet to have any issues with people like arguing in the comments, because listening to someone else talk about their passions in the occult world is a way for us to feel more connected, because we also have personal passions in the occult world. I want to talk about things that I find very interesting. And if I think that it could be a benefit to everyone else to hear it, then, people can take it for what it is. It doesn't mean I'm forcing you to believe it, but I find this really interesting. I think it's a great way to be more literate in the occult. And then I love hearing what other people's practices are. I love hearing their passions about, I did this type of deistic worship and I got this in response. And I'm like, that's amazing. I don't follow the same specific God this person does, but the fact that they're able to do these occult practices and feel like they're getting some tangible benefit from occult practice makes me excited, no matter what their belief is. And so the occult world, I feel like we need to start developing hotspots for, like you said, occult people coming together and backing each other up, because we all have similar backgrounds in terms of there's oppression in the world and we want to kind of be on the right side of history to kind of push back against that. And so yeah, that's what our occult society is all about. And I see that, no matter what your belief is, we all still really enjoy hanging out and talking together, and people really back each other up.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues that we run into as a community is there are a lot of big egos in the community, and everyone wants to have like a top spot, you know? And it, I inadvertently kind of like people, some people look at me, and I'm sure the same thing with you, and anyone that puts themselves out there, look at us as like community leaders, right? Like people to
Sure.
go to and look at and speak to. And I've always said like that's never been the goal. Like I don't want to lead
Yeah.
anybody. I really don't. And it's
Yeah.
also like even like the path that I'm building for people to be on, the Infernal Covenant, like it's predicated on the idea that there isn't a leader. There isn't a leadership in it. There isn't like an end all be all like head of everything. It's very intentional, because
Yeah.
that's for me, in my opinion, that is the beginning of every single fall in history, is when someone's head gets too fucking big,
Yep.
and they just want to manhandle everything. And it's like this isn't something that needs that. There's too many
Yeah.
people that already exist that want to do that, and there's a
Yeah.
reason why most of these people end up on the news, like every couple of
Yep.
years.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it usually ends with people drinking Kool-Aid. So
Cults are a big deal, man. And that, yeah, I'm definitely not trying to start a cult. I've never wanted to start a cult. I think people are drawn to the message, but at the same time, I don't consider myself the smartest person in the room, but I love to surround myself with some of the smartest people, because I feel like the ability to pull information is like what makes a good leader is not being the smartest person. It's being able to cultivate people who are able to hold up the entire ship. And there's a military concept that I'm a big fan of David Goggins, and he talks about this concept of like who's going to carry the boats, right? You can't just have one person carrying the boats. You need other people, and you can have a lot of ego, but at the end of the day, you're the only person carrying the boat. That's not what it's all about. You need other people on your team to create, leadership is great. Leadership is a good way to kind of give you tangible skills, but you really are reliant on the people around you that can help support. And that's why I've reached out to other seasoned occultists to be like, hey, do you want to do talks on this? Do you want to do courses on this? Because it's so important to give other people who are in the community ways for them to grow in their leadership as well. I think that's what also can stop people from becoming like cult leaders, right? If you cultivate leadership in a healthy way where it's very collaborative, and where you have an understanding that you're not the king, you are a CEO who is trying to make sure that you're delegating very well. um that type of leadership goes a long way in creating societies that feel very balanced, and there isn't this swell in hierarchy, and egos don't go too much, because you got people to kind of ground you and keep you centered. um But I'm interested to hear, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about occult hierarchy as well. You know what I mean? A little bit of like the gatekeeping aspect and stuff like that. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are initially too, because I know we touched on it a little bit before we got started, but I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what your thoughts were in terms of occultism and gatekeeping, and do we have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak?
I would definitely say yes. I do think that we have too many cooks in the kitchen. I think that everyone should be able to do whatever the hell it is that they want to do, without persecution and being called less for that. I think that that is a major aspect of the occult, and one of the things that attract a lot of people to the occult. But there is something to be said regarding tradition. There's something to be said regarding what our ancestors did and what we've lost to history. And I think that, there are a lot of ideas that have no supporting details, in history, that are grounded in absolutely nothing, that are becoming absolute truths. I had to do an entire essay about Lilith because of the misconceptions that surround, what the hell Lilith even is.
Mm-hmm.
And, like most people have never heard of the Lilitu, right? Like the spirit type that is a derivative, like, where Lilith is derived from, like going all the way back to, Sumerian and stuff like that. And I'm just like, this is why occult education is so important. It's like, yes, I don't like calling it gatekeeping, because I'm not telling people they can't do what they want to do. I'm not stopping people from doing what they want to do, but there needs to be a standardization. Like we cannot keep going the way that we're going, because I'm sorry, the more shit you add on to this stuff, the less powerful it becomes. And even I have felt it, like in my own ritual work, like as a secondary processing point, that the power that exists in this stuff feels more watered down than it used to.
Sure.
And it's because people keep going off and doing this, and that's fine. Do your thing. But what happens is we're starting to create traditions that aren't actually based on tradition.
Yeah.
And it's hurting the occult more than it's helping it. And it's like, you get people that get so like violently passionate about believing bullshit, with no, because they want something that's theirs, and that's fine. But it's like, you're lying to people. Like it's gotten to the point of people actually lying. Like the whole concept of Lilith being Lucifer's wife, that doesn't exist anywhere.
Mm-mm.
Like there is no documentation anywhere in history, Christian, Jewish, occult, that suggests at any point anywhere in history that Lilith and Lucifer were a thing.
Nope.
And it's like, but people legitimately believe this wholeheartedly, like with no question. And it's like, well, where did you get it from? Like, I heard, my friend's cousin's brother's sister said it. And it's like, really?
Well, people want to balance the masculine and feminine divine. You know what I mean? They want a Hades and Persephone story in every type of philosophical concept. And I think that's where a lot of myth making comes from in the occult community, is we have specific Jungian archetypes that we want seen in every type of occult practice, even where there is none. And so people will just innately want to assign these archetypes to things, because it's kind of our human nature. I mean, we're such smart creatures, but we're so dumb, and we use our innate I mean, that's why Jung developed the concept of the realms of the psyche in the first place, is because he understood so well how our brains work and how we go into these modes of recognizing archetypal patterns. And so, people see stories like Hades and Persephone. They see stories, in Kemetic, Ra and Isis and stuff like that. And they want those kind of archetypes to be in every other type of culture. And so, yeah, they want to pair Lucifer and Lilith together. And when it comes to like occult literacy, one of the things that is so interesting that I don't think a lot of people know about, specifically surrounding paganism, there is no modern pagan tradition that has a completely unbroken lineage from ancient religions. Everything is broken. Everything is a revival, save for like Wicca, which started in like the 1960s and still persists to this day. There's no other pagan practice that is an unbroken lineage. So if you think about other pagan practices, especially I see this a lot in heathenry. Heathenry is just a recreation of, um, you know, uh, um, Germanic religion and Odinism and stuff like that. And it's just a recreation of that. And so heathenry is like the modern equivalent of what those were. And I think a lot of people get modern heathenry equivocated with ancient Germanic religion and Odinism, which they're very similar, obviously, because they have, similar pantheons and stuff like that. But modern day heathenry is not ancient Germanic religion. And so we are trying to develop things in the modern world that is loosely related to things the ancient people used to do. And unless you are really academically inclined, or you're going to source materials, there's going to be a lapse in understanding, and you're going to kind of be drawn to um like modern day media. You know what I mean? I think media has a lot to do with how we see modern pagan practice, because we are influenced by Marvel comics depiction of Odin and Thor and Loki. And so we equivocate how modern heathenism looks like through the lens of what does our media show us. And so it's very easy to conflate things that are not true. I mean, even myself, I'm not unfallible in terms of my understanding of heathenry and ancient Germanic practices. I try to make sure that all of my videos are as like historically accurate as possible, because when you start becoming an influencer, everything you say is going to be so scrutinized. And it doesn't mean that you have to sanitize everything you say, but you start to have an immediate responsibility, because what you say for a lot of people ends up becoming, that's just how it is. And so even yourself, when we do podcasts and stuff like that, your word ends up becoming like doctrine for some people, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we're saying things that are accurate, and we're not pushing off responsibility onto others, like, oh well, I said that, but that doesn't mean whatever. And it's kind of hard when you're using TikTok mediums where you're trying to get a bunch of information out in like 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes. Videos do not become exhaustive. It's not an entire treatise. You're not creating a college thesis. So you're trying to get a lot of information out very quickly. But and maybe that short medium is not the place to have some of the most in-depth conversations, especially about occultism and paganism. It's a great way to get little morsels of information out to people so that they can do their own research. But people don't, in terms of gatekeeping, you are right. We need to have a structure for occultism, because other than, if we don't, then anyone can do whatever you want, but you should have at least enough literacy to know where you're diverging and where you're being authentic.
100%. And to your point of talking about kind of like heathenism, Norse paganism, stuff like that. And I think this is true. Like if you look at the Celts, you look at the Druids, just look through history, there is one major difference between then and now, them and us. For them, Thor, Odin, they were an explanation. They were an answer to a question that they had about the world around them, right? You know, why does this happen? Why do the seas get rough? Why do storms happen? Where does the thunder come from, right?
Yep.
And so we are so much more spiritually focused on these things. The stories of Norse paganism, for example, we're so focused on the stories that were something that was told in a, you know, around a campfire essentially back then, you know.
Yep.
And then they went on with their life. It was to the point where when they heard a thunderstorm rolling in, they would look to the sky and say, it's Thor. It wasn't, you know, that was it. That was the only thing to it, right?
Yeah.
We have manipulated it so much and focused on such a small aspect. Like, to be complete, the stories that were told during those time periods from the Celts and the Druids and the Norse pagans, it was such a small part of their everyday life, those stories specifically. But the spirituality was just a day-to-day thing. It was integrated into everything that they did. It wasn't I had to think about it and I need to do a ritual. It's like everything you did day to day was a ritual. Like,
yep.
the way that you built your house, the way that you did your crops, the way that you sold your food, the way that you fed your children, you know, all of those things played into everything that they were doing, and it was second nature. It wasn't an afterthought, and for us, it's an afterthought that we're trying to integrate. And so when we try to integrate these things, we lose the fucking point. Like, the script is just lost, because you're talking about a group of people that did shit so specifically, right, that it's just, and we don't do it justice. We don't do it justice, right? And that plays to the point of when you're talking about, like, you know, the Marvel Comics Hollywood version of Thor and Odin and, you know, Freya and like all of this stuff. It's like you lost the script, my friend. You lost it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this stuff ran so deep that being alive was existing in the path.
Yeah.
Like breathing was part of the path. And it wasn't, it's an afterthought for us. We over sensationalize the spiritual and ritualistic aspect of it. And I think that's where most occultism loses its power, because I get people all the time. I told you yesterday, I'm a dedicate of Baphomet. Most people believe Baphomet's nothing more than a symbol. But the thing is I've done the research. You go all the way back, you know, to the goat of Mendes, which isn't a 1-to-1 ratio to Baphomet, but throughout history, there has always been some type of goat god that has existed, you know, globally, across cultures, that people have worshipped. And so for me, the modern iteration of that is Baphomet, right? Regardless of how you view Baphomet, my belief is that because history has shown itself to have a tendency of having some type of goat god somewhere in every culture across the globe, it serves to me to reason that Baphomet would be the modern iteration of that, right?
Yeah.
And regardless of the image that you use, I personally, I like Levy's, you know, interpretation of Baphomet. Like, I appreciate it. I like it. There's a lot of balance to it. But people ask me, Thaddeus, how do you do a ritual to Baphomet? It's like, you just do it. You just do it. And the thing is that the most powerful part, the part that people miss, is the most powerful part of your practice isn't your fucking ritual. Like, how often are you actually in ritual? 2-3 hours a week, maybe? Like, if you're lucky, especially if you have a family. Like, you know, so it's like the most powerful part of your practice isn't the fucking ritual. It's what you do every single day, what you do day to day. And people like blow that part off. It's like, oh, I don't want to make washing dishes part of my, you know, my belief. When that's where you're failing then. That's where you're failing. Because if you're not willing to make every single part of your life an aspect of your practice and integrate it completely into yourself, then you're doing yourself and the practice a disservice.
I really appreciate that statement, and that's you're absolutely right. That's extremely powerful because one of the books that I read when I was going through my deconstruction, I think the author's name is like Rob Bell, and the book is called Everything is Spiritual. And the way he broke down the concept of, like you said, washing dishes is spiritual, cleaning your house is spiritual. We need to stop thinking of spirituality as this external thing we're trying to work on. Spirituality is in everything we do. It's in how we live our day-to-day lives. Spirituality exists in how we raise our children. It's how we vote at the voting booths. Everything is tied to where we sit in a spiritual realm in our own minds and how we manifest that spirituality into existence. And for me, I am hugely fascinated by the concept of death, and I think that that is the practice of memento mori is something that has given me almost a second life, because it's no longer a fear of death. It's a desire to understand it in a way where it becomes a teacher in your life and a guide for everything you do. And so that's why, kind of like what you said, you venerate Baphomet because of what it means to you. For me, I attribute death and memento mori into like Anubis and Hades. And so I do venerations for Anubis and Hades because I feel like they're the perfect culminative representation of, my desire to understand what the afterlife is trying to teach us as humans. And so when I live my life, I'm constantly thinking about, well, if I was going to pass away right now, what would I want to be having done before I did that? What lessons do I want to teach my children? What kinds of legacies do I want to leave behind? And that becomes its own spiritual practice, because now waking up in the morning is spiritual, because now my intention for that day is set by my understanding of my own mortality and how I can start to put things into the universe that I want to last beyond myself. And, whether it's for my family, whether it's for people that I care about, or whether it's just because I want to have, a pureness of my own soul in order to merit having an honorable death. You know what I mean? Um, it's spirituality is such an afterthought, and to be a true occultist, I think really you need to consider spirituality every moment of your day and every moment of your life. And just like you said, your ritual, it's fun. It's a good way to kind of power and energize yourself. Ritual is a great way to center, especially if you're going through like times of tribulation or chaos in your life. Ritual could be a very powerful rebalancing, but ritual starts when you wake up in the morning. Ritual ends when you lay your head on the pillow. And so every day is a ritual, and a morning routine is a ritual. Working out, everything is a part of how you internalize your practice and your spirituality and what you're trying to manifest throughout your day.
No, definitely. And I mean, it reminds me, like, I'm reminded of kind of like, ancient Greek traditions and Roman traditions when it comes to kind of like the Greek and Roman gods, in the sense that, like, most people, like, yeah, they had massive temples to their gods, but most people didn't spend a lot of time in those temples. Like, they went during festivals and things like that. Even the Norse pagans, like, I mean, they had like separate land that they would travel to,
Yeah,
specifically for
pilgrimages.
like, for festivals and stuff like that would last like a week or something like that. And then what did they do? They went back to farming,
Yep.
and it's one of those things that, like, there were specific people that chose the path of being what we would consider priests, right? Or like, shamans, or people that are dedicated to, the gods. But The problem is everyone in occultism today wants to be the person that dedicates their entire life to the gods, and it's like most people didn't do that. They used it as a map to show them how to balance themselves with the world around them, how to understand things that they didn't have an explanation for. Most people weren't doing rituals in their living room to the gods. Most people were living their lives with the gods in mind as an example of how to live their life. Like if you look at Odin's like sacrificed his eye for knowledge, right? That's a metaphor, right? To pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of intelligence, the pursuit of knowing, and personal sacrifice for that knowledge, right? Is what that represents and what that's for, right? And again, I'll reiterate the point. We've lost the script on that because it's all about, like, if you look online, it's all about the rituals. It's all about, the statues. It's all about the crystals. It's all about the incense. It's all about the candles. And it's like, what are you doing day to day to honor your gods? So for me, when I talk about Baphomet, I don't do ritual with Baphomet all the time. I do ritual with a lot of different entities. I'm polytheistic. But Baphomet, being a dedicant of Baphomet, does not mean that when I go into ritual, I'm always calling on Baphomet. Being a dedicant of Baphomet is using Baphomet as an example of balancing myself in the world around me, is not being too far on this side or too far on that side on anything, and being able to be in a position where I can objectively look at things and say, okay, what is actually happening here? Right. And not jumping to one side or the other, right, without proper knowledge of understanding. Right. It's not always being balanced. Right. Balance isn't always 50-50. Yeah. Sometimes I'll lean a little bit more 60-70% one way, 90% another way, whatever. But the idea of what we do with our gods, what we believe in, what we venerate, it isn't the ritual. It's how do you live day to day? How are you honoring that belief day to day?
Yeah, I agree. It's we love to, as humans in general. I mean, I think, if you look at people who go to church, right? You go to church once a week, you listen to a great sermon, you do some worship and stuff like that. But then a lot of Christians, when they go back to their day-to-day life, they live a life entirely different than what the lesson was that they just learned, right? I mean, I know we kind of beat that horse over the head earlier in this conversation, but I would say even people who consider themselves extremely religious, how actually religious are you compared to, how spiritual are you? Do you live with a mouthful of scripture but hatred in your heart? And church isn't just going to church every Sunday and then living however you want to live when you get out of church. It's about, your body is the church. And, whether you want to call it church, whether you want to call it a temple, if you're an occultist, you want to call it something else, your church, your lodge, your temple is your body. It's your immediate area. And you carry that temple with you wherever you go. And so you're constantly an ambassador of what your beliefs are. Every action you do is a reflection of what that belief is. Every decision you make, and it doesn't have to be so like ingrained in your head where you're like, oh, I got to make sure I'm doing everything exact. But like Joe Dispenza talks about the concept of like internalizing something so much where it just becomes an innate part of who you are. It's no longer like you start with a practice. And then from practice, it becomes repetition. And then repetition becomes ritual. And then it becomes, it ends up becoming just a part of who you naturally are as a person. You're not an occultist because you, do something a couple of hours a week that is occult. You're an occultist because you have some type of practice that becomes an innate part of who you are, and you can recall this practice at any given moment. Um, I'm curious, I know we talked a little bit about the concept of where does occultism kind of go in the future, right? You were talking about the concept of doing um like, lessons and stuff like that. I'm curious where you think if an occultist was coming to want to actually consider themselves, like, what kind of lessons would they need? You know what I mean? I know we talked about history and stuff like that. I don't know. I'll throw it back at you, I guess,
Well,
to drive the conversation.
okay. Yeah, because I mean, I think we also kind of blew over kind of like the whole gatekeeping thing. We needed to talk about that a little bit more, but I think that ties in a little bit as well. So I think first and foremost, to kind of come around full circle with the gatekeeping thing, I think the reason I think that it's necessary, and you've said that you agreed, is because with everything we just talked about, like the whole daily thing, how people live their lives, the whole idea of occult literacy, the idea of that is to make sure that people have the base knowledge of what it actually means. Now, when it comes to with that, you begin to kind of grow outward from that. And when it comes to like helping people and stuff like that, churches have services all over the world, right? For the homeless, for the hungry, stuff like that. Props to the Satanic Temple, for as much as I don't like the Satanic Temple. Props to them for what I give credit where credit is due.
Sure.
And, they have done a lot in that respect. I think the occult needs something more tangible because it's become very aesthetically focused. And I'm sorry, even people that do like practice like regularly and stuff like that, it's still aesthetically focused. It goes back into what we talked about, like how people believe, the small things, the little rituals that you do in your life, keeping your house clean, stuff like that, right? All of those things, play into where we're at right now because people aren't doing that. People are thinking I'm going to set up a really nice altar. I'm going to light up some candles. I'm going to burn some incense. I'm going to post a picture. But the thing is what about people that, need help? What about people like, so I have a life coaching aspect of the infernal system, which is Infernal Compass. And a lot of my clients are in recovery. It's, Infernal Compass is like an extended step forward, and it's radical accountability. Then from there you have Infernal Covenant, which is completely free. There's no price to admission, right? It's you take an oath to your home, right? Essentially, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but that's oversimplification of what it actually is. And there are meetings that happen with that every bi-weekly. For people to be able to know that they need help, but don't know necessarily what they need help with. Right. And then there's, Infernal Kids, which is Leor and Pip, which is for parents and children to, learn, these ideas, of, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay. It's okay that you're wrong, and it's needed that you take responsibility for it. If you take responsibility for your mistakes, it's a lot better than, if you try to deny them. We need to be more hands-on. I'm so fed up. I'm being completely honest. I am so unbelievably fed up with it's like an aesthetic competition. I used to describe church on Sunday as like a fashion show, of people like comparing outfits, as whoever had the people that, had, the better clothes would sit in the front pews, and the people that had, the cheaper clothes would sit in the back pews. And you could tell like what class person you were looking at as far as economics is concerned by the types of clothes that they wear or the pew that they sat in. And I feel like the occult is definitely moving that direction. And you have no idea how it disgusts me. Because it's all about like what brand of incense you're using, where are you getting your candles from, what statues do you have on your altar, and it's like, who gives a shit, like what matters, the important part is what are we doing for the world around us? Like at the end of the day, occultism in general, regardless of whether you're a demonolator or you believe in the old gods, it's earth-based. We're part of the earth. And so what are you doing for your community? What are you doing for your family? What are you doing? What are you actually doing that is helping people? And so, yes, I do fully believe that occultism needs to be more hands-on and needs to have more sectors dedicated to that, dedicated to helping people, really helping people, right? Like one of the things I did years ago, and it didn't work out as well as I thought it would. It was kind of like haphazardly done, but you know, the concept was solid. So I had a funding mechanism where there was a specific place where people would put money into it and it wouldn't be touched. It would just sit there.
Yeah.
And when somebody in the community came up, right, and this usually would happen around like New Year or Christmas or something like that, somebody in the community would come up and say, I need help. Like, I just lost my job. You know, I can't pay my electric bill. You know, I don't have any presents for my kids.
Yeah.
That's what that money was for.
Yeah.
That's what, but that was real fucking help. It wasn't idealistic help. You know, it wasn't, because that shit pisses me off so much. Like churches do that shit. Like if somebody goes to a church and says, I need help. Oh, pray with me. What the fuck is prayer going to do? Like,
right.
You know, a person needs to pay their fucking rent. God's not going to come down and here's a $600 check. No, yeah. If a priest can drive a fucking Beamer and live in a 6-bedroom house by himself,
have 2 jets.
The church can fucking afford to put some money aside for people that actually need some realistic, tangible help. Now, the problem with the system that I had set up was there was no way of verifying, you know, what people needed. It was taking people at their word, right?
Yeah.
And it got so rampant that there was no more funding. People were taking, but nobody was putting in.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
And so that's where the problem happens. It just got to a point. It's like we don't have the funding. I'm sorry. Like I would love to give you money, but we don't have it. You know, and so it's just like that's the type of help that I think people need, is to know that like an organization or a group of people or a community of people actually have their back. You know, if you need help with recovery, that there's something there. There's a guy in England, his name's Ben, that actually created an entire 12-step system called Satanic Recovery, which is it's theistic Satanism in a 12-step program. And
that's great.
You know, it does an amazing fucking idea, because so many people in the occult, and especially like, you know, on this, you know, the left-hand path side of it, don't want to go through 12 steps, even though they know that they need to, because they don't want the God narrative being pushed on them.
Yeah.
You know, so having something like that available to people is fucking amazing. You know, it really fucking is. And there's online meetings. There's you know, physical meetings in the U.S. and England. You know, so anyone that I know that's in 12 steps, I mean, I immediately, you know, shoot them that link. You know, I'm like, here, you know, look at this. You know, and what I try to do with what I'm doing is I try to mirror that as much as possible in terms of like how we do meetings and stuff like that too. Because sometimes, like, as someone with ADHD and other things, there's been plenty of times in my life where like I need help. I just don't know what fucking help I need. Like I know something's off, but I don't know what it is. And unfortunately, psychology is a beautiful thing, and I think everyone should have a therapist, but it's not cheap having a therapist.
Sure. Yeah.
You know?
Agreed.
And so, and it's something that bothers me so much, because, you know, you can get insurance that covers certain things, but it's loose at best. You know, the people that you have contact with aren't the best. And I'm not saying I'm a therapist or I'm providing free therapy, because that would be illegal. I'm not a therapist and I'm not providing free therapy. you know, but to give somebody something, man, something that's going to help them like reflect on their shit so they don't make a stupid choice that's a permanent one.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and that's where it starts. It starts with the big shit like that, right? Because when you focus on like, I want to stop something big and bad from happening, it's about helping with the little things that build up to that big bad thing happening.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when people are so fucking focused on ego and they're so focused on, I want to be, you know, the end all be all in this side of the community or this part of the community or this sector of the occult, the people that are coming to the occult, if you look at the patterns, the psychological patterns of the types of people that come to the occult and the reasons they come to the occult, they're people that need help. And when you get people that are taking advantage of those fucking people because they want to sell a fucking book.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the only thing that they're offering. And it's fine. I'm not saying it's bad to people from the authors that are just, that's what they're doing. That's their focus. That's their job. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, and it's not for everyone. I'm not saying everyone needs to do this. Right.
Yeah.
But there has to be something. Something has to break through that's going to actually be there to help people. So, yeah, I'm sorry. That was very long-winded, but
No, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm just, you know, collecting my thoughts about it, and honestly, the occult, if your practice isn't transcendental, if it's not making a positive impact in your life, then it's compensatory. An occult practice becomes compensatory when it's used to fill a void or patch a hole that needs to be filled in a healthier way. And I think that's why a lot of the 12-step programs for AA, all it's doing is replacing addiction. The concept of you know, religious church-based AA is I'm going to flip your addiction from a substance to a being. And there needs to be healthier alternatives. And you know, I'm glad you brought up the concept of, like, you know, the satanic approach to it as well, because when occultism is used to just like patch drywall without addressing what that inherent piece that's missing in someone is, then I'm trying to collect my thoughts. Occultism has such a ability to draw in people, and I'm trying not to sound like mean about this at all, because there are people who need help, but mental health is such a factor when it comes to occultism. And I see it a lot on like social media when I join, you know, as a fun little, oh, this is a fun occult community on Facebook, right? Like an occult Facebook group. Let me see what this is all about. And there's so many people in there who are interested in the occult for the wrong reasons. And they think that someone can give them a spell to fix their life. And they say, oh, you know, who has a, you know, I'm being haunted by demons. Can someone help me? You know, and I'm not saying that, you know, people aren't dealing with actual metaphysical things, but I also believe that there's so many people who struggle with mental health as a and the occult is not for every person to get that kind of you know, I'm going to write you a prescription for this spell and it's going to fix all of your issues. That's not what the occult is for. And I think a lot of people who are having dependency issues, if they're having substance abuse issues, if they're having psychological issues, they can see the occult as a catch-all or a cure-all for their issues. And people are eager to find someone to just give them a black and white answer. And that is where we as occultists have a duty to not be snake oil salesmen, because it's very easy. I could write a book about how, this one specific prayer is going to bring you financial benefits into your life. It's going to keep you protected from demons trying to infest your mind, and it's going to do all, XYZ. And I'm going to get a bunch of people to buy this book, because a lot of people, that's all they want. They just want you to tell them this is the answer to your problems. I'm going to sell you my course on how to, do all this stuff. And it's not beneficial in the long term to a healthy occult society. We're no better than any other religion that is pushing, whatever doctrine we want to consider as truth to people that are genuinely hurting. And that's why, like, born again Christians are so dangerous, in my opinion. When you're a person who's been hurting your whole life, and then you fill that void immediately with this religious revival, you become like a dangerous weapon all of the sudden. And that could be filled with anything. Religious, oh my word, the word I'm trying to think of, religious psychosis, religious psychosis can not only comes in the form of organized religion, it can come from occultism as well. You can have religious psychosis in the occult community. And I think that's why it's very important that we try to create safe pathways to the occult, where we can address people. Like, if you have a genuine mental health disorder, if you're dealing with genuine substance abuse issues, unless we have a tangible way that we're helping people, we can't just, be snake oil salesmen. We can't lower ourselves to other religions who are I'm just wanting to fill this void in your life with anything so that you latch onto it, and it just becomes, your entire personality all of the sudden. And I think religion is so good at doing that. Religion is so good at filling that void and saying, this is where you're hurt. I'm going to just slot this right in, and you're going to become a automaton for this thought. And it can happen in the occult community as well. And we have a duty to not do that.
Well, I mean, I'll speak from, this is anecdotal, because I mean, it's only one person I've seen doing this, but I'm sure that there's significantly more people. But I remember I was on TikTok, and somebody had messaged on one of my videos on TikTok that, that they wanted to be on the show because they said that they would make me feel pain like I've never felt before, like without ever actually being there. I was like, okay, let me see what the hell this. Let me see what this person's about. And so I went to their TikTok and I started scrolling through it, and I saw. I don't think I've ever been so pissed off. Like, I hate the term triggered. I hate the term triggered, but I don't think I've ever been triggered by something so much in my life. Yeah. So I was watching. So this person was uploading like clips from lives that he was doing. And there was literally one clip, one TikTok video that was this person telling someone in their chat to fire their therapist, that he would fix them in one session. Dude, I got so pissed.
Oh my God.
And the fact that like this person puts doctor in front of their name, right? I mean, unfortunately, doctor doesn't inherently mean medical doctor, but when you are a medical doctor, even a psychiatrist, here's a good way to check. So there is a national registry for medical professionals that they have to be registered on it if they are actively practicing, and it's NIPS. Okay, it's the NIPS. You can go in and you can type anyone's name into NIPS, right? And you can find whether or not they are authorized to practice where they are practicing and what they are practicing. So I went to NIPS and I checked this person's credentials. No credentials to be found. And so I went on a tirade because I was like, you cannot, one, be calling yourself a doctor if in terms of a medical doctor, if you are not a medical doctor, regardless of whether or not you have a doctorate, you cannot present yourself falsely as a medical doctor to the public. One. Two, you cannot be telling people to fire their therapist and claiming that you will fix them in one session.
Oh,
It
that's
is
so
illegal.
dangerous.
Not only is it dangerous, it's fucking illegal.
Yeah.
You know, and so, oh, dude, I know I went on a tirade. I was so pissed. I was so pissed.
Yeah.
You know, like, and no, the occult is not an exchange for medical assistance. It's not, and nor should it ever be looked at that way.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to, you know, Infernal Compass, like Infernal Compass is a paid program. It's a 12-week program. It's paid, right, over the 12 weeks. But I will not take someone on if they don't have an active support system, like, you know, when they come into it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that means I'm spending more money. I won't take someone on into Infernal Compass if they don't have an active therapist. If you don't have an active therapist, if you're not in active therapy, I will not allow you into Infernal Compass because it's that deep.
Yeah.
I won't allow you in because I become liable
Sure.
for what you do. Like, so if you don't have a support system, right, outside of me, I won't take you on.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the professional way of doing it. That is the correct way of doing something like that. Like, for us as occultists to sit there and think that we can fucking fix people, or think that we're better than, you know, somebody that went to school for 7 to 10 years, you know, to work somebody's head out, you know, it's arrogant and it's dangerous.
It is. And I have people in my life that I would consider like students, right? I have people that you know are practitioners of the occult, and I enjoy being able to help people, but I also know where the extent of my knowledge is. And luckily for me, you know, being able to be involved in organizations that are initiatory esoteric traditions, I get access to a lot of people that are interested in, you know, the mysteries of the universe and stuff like that. And being able to be a coach for people is very rewarding for me, because I am of the mind where you don't know if you really know something unless you're able to teach it to someone else. Um, Having a scholastic knowledge of topics is great, but if you're going to embody it, and if you're going to try and be a guide for other people, you need to be able to teach it in a way where other people can understand it and latch onto it. But it's not in the sense of like, now I'm your guru. You know what I mean? I don't you know, take approaches from a guru, you know, master apprentice type of thing. It's like being a good coach is, you know, just about helping someone with understanding. It's you know, in Zen philosophy, it's the concept of you know, you're looking at the reflection of the moon, and instead of looking at the moon itself, right? Or you're the hand pointing to the moon, telling them to study the moon, you know? And so that is always the approach that I've taken, because um it's easy to look up to people as a figure of, you know, you're gonna you know, cure all my wounds, you're gonna answer all of my questions. And it's very easy for people with a lot of ego to get sucked into, well, now I'm the doctor, you don't need a therapist, come to me. And oh, it's such a disservice, because it hurts more people than it helps, and it creates organizations like yeah, you know, like the Heaven's Gate cult, you know what I mean? When people use occultism to become leaders, in a sense that they're trying to build this separate metaphysical environment for people to follow a doctrine that they've developed, instead of trying to just kind of educate on doctrine that is ancient, or what you're, you know, kind of like what you said. One of the things that I am very frustrated about when I go to these like online occult communities on like Facebook and stuff like that, is people presenting themselves as subject matter experts, where they haven't gone through any, and I'm not, I'm in a back and forth mindset about gatekeeping as well. Yes, gatekeeping is good in a lot of ways because we do need to make sure that the knowledge that is being provided is accurate and is um in alignment with what the actual system is trying to promote, right? We can't just be, saying whatever the hell we want to say and that just becomes automatically true. We need to have a certain amount of gatekeeping. And in some of the esoteric initiatory things that I'm a part of, it takes years in order to genuinely understand what the practice is trying to say. And it's very easy for someone to get a book on the same subject, read that one book, and then imagine that they're a subject matter expert and start making blanket statements about the entire practice because they read one book and they haven't lived the actual doctrine. And that's one of the things that frustrates me so much is how easy it is for someone to become a mouthpiece in the, esoteric society about something that, number one, they're not genuinely a part of, and number two, they read one book about it and they think that they can now speak to, this is exactly what the belief is, this is exactly what the practice is, and because I did it once or twice, I can teach you how to do it. And it's so frustrating, and I think it needs to be called out. And it's not like that's gonna, that I'm gonna change those people's minds, but creating some type of accredited system where people are able to genuinely go through something that is a okay, we're going to teach you, this is the fundamentals, this is occult history 101, and you need to understand the actual foundation before you can even talk about ritual, right? Don't even worry about ritual right now. What's the foundation of this occult practice? What is the history? And then how do you evolve eventually into, okay, now I'm going to work on my ritual. I'm going to work on a practice. And then you do that long before you ever start teaching about it.
Well, I think the benefit of like creating an accreditation agency or organization is the first step into all of this, because there are so many schools, there's so many, academies. Like everyone and their grandmother has an occult academy of some type, like everyone looks at it as, a cash grab, right? And, that's fine. Like if people want to teach their tradition or whatever, but I think an accreditation organization or agency, the importance of it is multifaceted. So first and foremost, it might not be, a school in and of itself, but maybe something where somebody that wants to teach the occult can get training to teach the occult. And so that way everyone can have their own organization, right? They can have their own academy, they can have their own school, right? They don't inherently need to be accredited, the organization needs to be accredited, but if they are accredited by the agency, then they can turn around and say, I have this qualification from this, accreditation, agency within the occult that says that I can teach these things. Also, when somebody wants to set up kind of like a life coaching thing or, anything like that involves people's mental health, we can verify, that one, they have an accreditation from somewhere else for psychology or therapy or, something like that. And then they can come to us, like, or come to, and yes, I'm including myself in this, like they can come to this accreditation agency to verify that they understand the esoteric and occult knowledge that they're going to be using in conjunction with this. And they need the two accreditations in order to run that business. And it's not to make money for us, it's to make sure that people are safe. It's to make sure that nobody is going out there and creating a bunch of bullshit and then making you drink Kool-Aid at the end of it. That's what it's about, right? That's what the unification is about. That's why it's important to have accreditation. In order to have accreditation, though, there's one very important thing that is going to be the most difficult part of everything. And it's something that I've been doing over the last 5 years. It's standardizing occult information.
Yeah.
Like that is like the big thing, right? Like, you need to standardize the information before you go out there and you start, having people just, sorry, a notification, your name just popped up. I was like, what was that? But then there's nothing in there. um, like, it's, that's how I see it, right? I don't view it as something to make money off of. I see it as something as standardizing the whole system and making sure everyone agrees on what the standards are, right? And it's not just the information, but it's the practice. How are we going to, how are you pushing this out there? What are you telling people? Right. And having those standards to say, well, I want to, create an organization where people stop going to the doctor and, they come to me for me and my people for help. No, we're not going to credit you.
Yeah.
And if they don't, people can look and say, if they don't have that accreditation from us, then it's your choice of whether or not you want to go, down that road with them, whatever it is that they're offering. But you can use it as a mapping point to say whether or not that's something you can trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's something the occult doesn't have that. We don't have it.
No, we don't at all. And I think that's why it's very easy to have snake oil salesmen in the world, because especially in the influencer age. And I even though I guess technically I would be considered an influencer just because of like my videos on TikTok, I don't want to consider myself an influencer in the sense that I am trying to push snake oil. I want to make sure that my voice is factual. I want to make sure that I'm guiding people in the right way. And you learn very quickly that when you put yourself out there online, just how much of a duty you immediately have to accuracy, and how much of a duty you have to every word you say is scrutinized. Every video I make is scrutinized. And so I have a duty to myself. I have a duty to other people. And it's very easy to, like, I think of those, the people who, they go on ayahuasca trips and then they come back and then they're like, oh, I'm a shaman now. And it's so easy to like do that. You know what I mean? It's so easy to take some psychoactive substance and then all of a sudden become this enlightened guru. And it's if people follow you because of I think at the end of the day it's like, okay, well let's look at the long-term harm. Like, what's the long-term good, what's the long-term harm? And there is a difference between, is it something that's harming people or is it something that's helping people? And oftentimes, harm can come from it, but people want to be heard. And if people are willing to let someone else feel heard, it's very easy to build followings in that sense of, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to give you, like, I'm gonna help get rid of your accountability for why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And that's where we need to be very careful. And so accreditation is a great concept, because there is real history, there is real occult tradition, there is real practice, and then there is fluff. And there is and we talked about aesthetics earlier today. Obviously, I'm very drawn to aesthetics as well. I think the aesthetic of occultism is the aesthetic of occultism is so beautiful. And I think that really is the initial draw, right? If you're a person who is raised very pure and upright, and things that are fringe or scary for you, and then you start to get a glimpse and you're like, ooh, this gothic, dark academia occult vibe is a little bit eye-catching and it's so exciting. It does initially draw people in. It does pull you into the visuals, and you see these gorgeous altars, and so it's a great way to get people to like have a taste of what the occultist world is about. But then a lot of people aren't gonna continue on beyond that. And so if they're not going to be a serious occultist, whatever. If you just want to be an armchair occultist, if you want to be an armchair practitioner, no one's gonna say boo about it. But it's when that becomes like a standard in an academic level where there becomes issue, because then it's like, I'm going to speak at this with authority that I don't have. And I know that authority isn't the catch-all, the end-all as well. There's different types of philosophical fallacies, logical fallacies, appeal to authority and stuff like that. But at the same time, like, a lot of that's true. You do want to have a factual understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish, because if not, like, I learned in college, there was a rule that we learned, which was learn the rules so that you can learn how to break them. And the intention behind that is you need to understand what the rules are, because you can't just go around breaking rules because you want to break rules. You have to know why things are done the way they're done. You have to understand what the rules are, and you have to follow the rules long enough to where you have a foundational understanding of what the rules are, and then you can kind of break rules a little bit here and there. And that's where we get different denominations of different types of esoteric practice, which again, it's all fine and dandy, but the foundation still needs to be there. And I know we talked
100%.
about, like, different types of paganism are fractured because there is no existing foundations. People are creating foundations from scratch, and people are creating occult practices from scratch with new foundations, because a lot of them are fragmented. We don't have the Golden Dawn anymore. You know what I mean? If we had these continued charters and lineages of occultism, we might be able to see those structures. And how do we get to that eventual future world where occultism becomes as standard as any other religion? It really has to come down to what does religion do right and what does it do wrong? What religion does right is it creates structure and it creates places of reverence where people can come together to learn and to worship and to grow. How do we as occult practitioners create a system where it's also very structured, where it's not toxic, where we are cultivating people to feel empowered in practice? Because right now we don't have anything like that. And so maybe, I think that for as much as you may disagree with the Satanic Temple, they're doing a counterculture to religion, and they're building something that religion does well. And it's I don't know, maybe that's not the answer, but you can see what they're doing and you go, I understand why it draws, because they're doing the things that religion does, but they're just doing it in a counterculture type of way. And so maybe other types of occultism need to build foundations like that through some form of accreditation to get their, temples made and to get people behind those ideas.
100%. 100%. One second, my 11-year-old is messaging me because it's easier for him to text me than it is for him to actually walk up and ask me a question.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, I mean, I think the accreditation aspect of things, first and foremost, it would have to be, as an occult community, we would have to agree on a group of us. I would say too many would make it too rough, and too few would make it not believable, not trustworthy. At least 5 people would have to come together from different denominations, different sects, things like that, that have, academic knowledge of the occult, not theoretical or anecdotal, and would have to agree on standards. And here's the thing, it's never going to be perfect the first time around. Like, people are going to complain. People are not. There's going to be an uproar in the community once something like that is created, and we're never going to be able to cover everything. And just because something won't be accredited doesn't make it invalidated, because the accreditation isn't designed for validation. The accreditation is designed for safety, right? It's designed for standards, and that's something that people need to understand. And so, yeah, is it going to be a difficult thing to set up? Yeah, it will be, but it's something that's necessary. And the thing is inside of the occult, unfortunately, general society doesn't have, an accreditation system that exists that would fall into, the occult that would be valid in accrediting occult information. So therefore, we are responsible as a community to create that for ourselves, and then go
Yeah.
through whatever governmental processes are necessary nationally and internationally to allow that accreditation to be recognized on businesses and people's applications, right? So, like, again, my idea is, I for accreditation in that system is to create something that somebody wants to open up, an academy of some type. Okay, cool. You need to have at least one accredited professor on your team, in a leadership role. Not all
Yeah.
of your teachers need to be accredited, but you need to have at least
Sure.
one,
You could have some oversight.
and so that way, they would have to come to us and say, okay, well, get me a teacher. Get me a professor that I can use, right? Or have them send somebody to us. Obviously it wouldn't be free, but they would come through to us and get that accreditation, 18 months, 24 months, whatever the case may be, and get that accreditation to then go into, another area, and have that oversight over that academy or over that school and stuff like that. And that's how it needs to start. We need something like that, and to fight against something like that, I mean, you're fighting progress.
Yep. Well, think about, how much work it takes to become a pastor in a church. There are entire colleges dedicated to teaching, biblical literacy, because you have to go through training in order to be a pastor. You have to go through training in order to be a member of the clergy. You have to go through training to be a Buddhist priest. You know what I mean? Every major religion has some form of formal training associated with credibility. With, if you want to start your own chapter of something, you need to have some backing behind it in order to consider yourself legitimate. And I don't think the occult community necessarily needs to be any different. I think, in fact, it would give credibility to people being able to start mystery schools of their own with the understanding that they are coming at it from an ethical perspective. And I think ethical occultism is a big thing, because there's a lot of ways to practice unethical occultism, and being able to develop ethical occult criteria that is a prerequisite to an established occult practice or esoteric tradition is a great way to progress the occult community into a new phase where it can rival a little bit of contemporary religious authority in the world. I would love to be able to say, oh yeah, there's a new politician who's running, who, is an occult practitioner, and not for it to just be, oh, he's another, XYZ religious person. And it's the fundamentals need to change, the culture needs to change. And I think that's a terrific idea. I think, it does take a lot of work, but a lot of systems that get developed where there's a lot of pushback, from what I've seen in other traditions, that pushback only lasts like 3 years before it becomes, oh, this is how we've always done it. You know what I mean? If you can push past the naysayers, if you can push past the people who want to fight against it for once it's been established for 3 years, that's how we've always done it. That's just what it is now. And it's very easy to create new traditions that way. So, I mean, do it, man. Let's figure it out. I would love to, find a way to organize occultism in a way that becomes more established, and give credibility where it's due, because a lot of occult is so credible, and the general population sees it as fringe or scary or the unknown. And it's like, no, this is there's so much documented history, there's so much established lore, there's so much ingrained practice. We just need you to understand that it exists. Just because you don't know it exists doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, like I said, I'm a systems builder, man. Like, I mean, that's what I do. I'm kind of like this conversation has got me very excited because this is something I've been talking
Yeah.
about for years. So yeah, I think we've been on for 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. I would love to keep going, but I need to get him ready because his mom's coming to pick him up. So, Blake, man, I thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us and putting the stuff out there. I'm definitely I don't know like how in the public eye, because you had mentioned to me that your partner is also a practitioner. I don't know
Yeah.
how in the public eye your partner is, but my wife and I, we do another podcast called Adversary. My Adversary I told you about, where it's a couples thing. And we've been
I love
looking,
that. That's awesome.
we've been actively looking for, other couples that are occultists together to come on and actually have that discussion. And I think it would be an amazing discussion, the four of us, because, all four of us are occultists. We both of us have kids,
Yep.
I think it would be an amazing conversation if if something you would be willing to bring up to your partner,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to have you guys on. So how about you tell the people where to find you, where you're most active, and what you got going on and where to find that.
Yeah, thank you. I really genuinely appreciate you having me on. This was so much fun, and I feel like we could exhaust conversations into the wee hours, and I'd love to have more conversations with you in the future. Um, to find me, I am the Gentleman Occultist on all social medias: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And then in the bios of all of those, you will find, if you're interested in joining my occult society, it's also the Gentleman Occultist. We use a platform called School. We have about 700 people in the occult community right now, from all over the world, different practitioners. And not only are there courses that you can take, it's just a general great discussion with people from different, philosophies and walks of life. We do live events as well once a month. I'm trying to develop more of, a live curriculum and stuff like that, but it's very nascent right now. And if you're wanting to join to enjoy something that's fast growing, I'd love to have anyone on who's interested in the occult. But that's me. And I want to, thank you so much again, Adius, for having me on here. And this was so much fun. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure of mine to have you on, man. So yeah, everyone go follow the Gentleman Occultist, go follow Blake, go check his stuff out. And I'm sure that, you're going to be seeing more of him, and as conversations between him and I develop. And as always, everyone, hail thy fucking self, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace the fuck out.